thank you for joining the show today. And as you know, if you have watched Word for Word in the past, I love to have conversations with very interesting people. And so today on the show, and just so you know, we're doing Facebook Live for the very first time and also LinkedIn Live for the very first time. So this is very exciting for me. I hope it's exciting for you as well. And I hope that you get a kick out of this story that we're going to talk about today. So on the show today, we're talking to Miss Lisa Lang. Welcome, Lisa. How are you today?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on both LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live.
It is very exciting. And when I was scrolling, and I've been using LinkedIn for a while, and because of where we are today, and we've been kind of, locked in the house, if you will, for the last couple of years, I think that the social media platforms have become so extremely valuable to connect with people because of the face-to-face is not really there anymore. But the
Right.
world is getting smaller, and it's very easy to
Mhm.
connect with people almost anywhere. I mean, you're in Kentucky.
Yes.
I'm outside of Chicago. And just really trying to connect with people who have very interesting stories to tell. And hopefully that story can benefit some people who may potentially want to follow in your footsteps, if you will. So let's start by just talking about your career a little bit. Can you just give us a snapshot of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, and I'll try and keep it brief. I have a tendency, it's my career has zigged and it has zagged. So I'll try and give you the high points. The reason I talk a lot about all of the points, I think there is this belief that you know what you're gonna do when you start on your career path. And I have been all over the place, and I love the Steve Jobs quote that says that you can only connect the dots when you look backward, that rather than when you look forward. And I think that's true for me. Every experience that I have had may have seemed odd at the time I had it, but at the end of the day, every single one of those experiences prepared me for where I am today. So as you know, I started at Eastern Illinois University in the teacher education program. And I got all the way to the end. And, growing up, I loved two things. I loved the law and I loved teaching. And at the last minute, I made a change and I decided not to go into teaching. And instead, I decided that I was interested in the law, but I wasn't necessarily sure I was ready to go to law school. And so what I did was I joined the military. And I joined the military as a paralegal, a military specialist. And I thought that it would give me the opportunity to kind of get a sense of what the legal profession was about and whether or not it was a career I was interested in. And, honestly, looking back, it was probably the best decision I've ever made because there's not a lot of career choices that you can make that will help prepare you for leadership roles in the future. And so I spent 6 years in the military, and it was huge for me. I learned so many things from being in the military, and I'm glad I had the experience. After I got out of the military, I had gone in with a bachelor's degree. So I got the GI Bill and I used it to go to law school. And I worked during the day as a civilian paralegal in a law firm. And I went to school at night at the Brandeis School of Law in Louisville, Kentucky. Also, an excellent experience because what I got was I learned during the day about those things I read about and talked about at night. And so for me, that was an excellent preparation, and it just helped supplement my education by working during the day. Now it wasn't easy. I was raising three children at the time, and so it was a challenge, but also good and glad that I did that. I ended up becoming an associate attorney there for a few years, and then I left, and then I went to state government. And when I went to state government, I went to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office in Kentucky is almost like a law firm in that it represents state agencies. And the interesting thing is the agency that I started representing the most was the education agency. And so, it just shows the experience that I had in the past helped me, I think, be a better lawyer for my client because I did have some familiarity with education because of the training I had gotten in college, even though I didn't actually become a teacher. And so it was while I was at the Kentucky Department of Education, I learned a lot about K through 12, and we had a board. It was the Education Professional Standards Board, and that was the first job I got as a general counsel, and it was related to the Kentucky Department of Education, and that was my first taste of higher education. And so with that, when we got a new president in Frankfurt at Kentucky State University, I was encouraged to apply for that position because of my extensive background in education. And in education, especially in Kentucky, there's not a lot of us that know it. And if you know anything about education, what I love about what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at it holistically. We're looking at it from, pre-K all the way to college, and I really love the fact that we're starting to look at it that way. So part of the reason I believe I got my job now, and the reason I can do what I'm doing as well as I'm doing it, is because our focus now in the higher ed space is to take a look at what is happening to our students, how are they getting prepared, and then we have to take them as we find them. And then there are things that we have to do to help and support them to get through their education. So, I always probably talk too much, but I think it's so important for people to understand, and I'll tell you, whenever I made each one of those decisions, people thought I lost my flipping mind.
Let me ask you a question. And I must apologize to you because I should have started with this.
Yes.
Happy Women's History Month.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. And I think from what you just said, it can be very challenging to be a female in trying to establish yourself, whether it's corporate America, whether it's the military, or whether it's in education.
Right.
So what do you think some of the biggest challenges were for you? And let's just start with the military, because of course we know that's typically a male dominated industry, if you will. What was it like as a female in the military?
Well, and it's so funny, and people have asked me that question before, and I don't want to say that there aren't these challenges and these obstacles, and maybe I was lucky in terms of the people with whom I was surrounded, because I felt very supported, and part of it may have been because I was in part of the JAG Corps, and so when you're in the JAG Corps, there were a lot of women in there, and there was a lot of men. And I really felt I had, when I went into the military, I didn't have children, but once I got in the military, I did have children. And the one thing that I felt, and I know some people may not agree with this, but I felt very supported. And I was not forced to choose between being a wife and mother and doing my job. The last two positions I had, when I was with the 18th Military Police Brigade in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I was attached to a military police unit, and that military police unit had both men and women within it, and women had already kind of started establishing themselves as a part of the units. And what I watched and saw was a real, there was an acceptance I saw. Now, maybe I didn't see everything, but I felt like it was acceptance. Now, I will tell you one story that I was responsible for a private for the first time as a Sergeant E5. And I was like, I don't know, 23, and he at the time, and, two young children. And my private was like 19, first time out of the house. So it's not great when you go in front of a formation and you're trying to have a conversation with your soldier. I don't want to say discipline, but to make a correction. And he says to me, not yes, Sergeant. He says, yes, Mom, and rolls his eyes. And I was like, I talked to him later, and I was like, okay, I know you're trying to be funny, but didn't really appreciate you calling me Mom in front of the entire formation.
Right. That's funny. Now let's talk about becoming a lawyer.
Yes.
And I have a background in education, and there were times when, after I got my master's, I thought about going back to school and getting my PhD. And just because I wanted to be the best of the best at whatever I did. And so becoming a lawyer, that's one of those careers where, with the hopes of being the best of the best. So let's talk about some challenges that becoming a lawyer, and talk about some adversity or some things that you had to overcome that could be a good life lessons for someone who's thinking about becoming an attorney.
Yeah. And, and so part of the reason when I didn't talk about, and when I talk about often when I talk about this journey is I had a fear of public speaking. So when I was in high school, our senior year, we had a senior debate, and we had to get up in front. It culminated into a final debate in front of the entire school. And to this day, I can't remember what happened because I completely froze. And so, when I was struggling with trying to decide to be a teacher or be a lawyer, at the time, my thought was, okay, yeah, lawyer, hard no. If you can't get up in front of a room full of people to do a senior debate, how are you ever going to get up in front of a classroom? But then when I went to college and I had to get up in front of a classroom of students, I thought, well, this is crazy. Why did I say no to being a lawyer? Because I didn't want to get up in front of people, but yet I'm going to be a high school English teacher and I'm going to get up in front of a room full of, high school kids. And those kids at the time were not that much younger than me.
Right.
So I had to get over that feeling of I was not good enough, and the fear of speaking in public. So that was one adversity I had to get over. The other thing I had to get over was I had gone to the University of Illinois Lab School. That's part of the University of Illinois Uni, and you had to apply to get in there. And we were the quote unquote best of the best. And so I got my first taste of competition. And I was used to being in public school and being, A at the top of the class. And so the other thing that I had to think about in terms of going to law school was I was going to find myself in another situation where I was with the best of the best, people who were smart. And I just wasn't really sure between the problems and the issues I was having with public speaking and then with having been into a very high pressured, very competitive high school, I wasn't sure that I wanted to go to law school. And I didn't know if I wanted to be in a profession that did that. But after going in the military and then working in a law firm, yeah, there were some downsides, but I also caught the bug and the fever and a passion. I remembered this is what I want to do. I can do this. And I really felt because I had taken 9 years of life and I had done all these other roles. Yes, sure, it was hard. Yes, there was a lot of stress, but I felt prepared at that point to be able to handle the stress, both attending school and then also embarking on this career because of everything I had done up to that point. And a lot of people, they don't go in to school with a real idea and understanding of what they're getting into, and they are not. I don't know that they're truly committed to the dedication. But by the time I had gotten there, hell, I'd been through everything. And I was like, I can't think of much else I could go through except maybe getting pregnant my second semester law school and then try, working during the day, go to school at night and being pregnant. That was not probably one of my best ideas, but.
You bring up, and I didn't even think to talk about this, but a very, very valid and important point. So I was an adjunct for 17 years. And so one of the first questions I would ask my students, why are you in this classroom? And we're talking, because it was a community college, there were your traditional just out of high school, or you've got some people who, went to work for 5 years and now they're coming back to school, or the single mother who's, I've been a single mom for so long, or a house mother, now I want to get my degree.
Right.
The question was, why are you here? What do you want to do? And most of them had no idea unless it was the older adult who had been through some things in life.
Right.
And just like you said, I mean, I've been through so much now. Going through college is a breeze because I know who I am. And I've been challenged in multiple ways, because you mentioned that you're at an HBCU. And that was another thing that caught my attention when I was reading a LinkedIn profile. So you're around college students an awful lot.
Yes.
And then just being at an HBCU, what's that experience been like for you?
Eye-opening, really and truly, because you and I both know what an HBCU is, a historical Black college and university. But honestly, I found that not everybody knows what that kind of institution is, and people don't also understand the place that HBCUs have in our country, a very important place. We serve first generation low income students, not only, but a large part of our population is that. And there was a time when an HBCU was the only place students can go who were Black, but now they have a choice, and a lot of them are executing or exercising the option to go to an HBCU and not going to a school that's not an HBCU. And the reason why is as I've noticed, is we're steeped in tradition. And what we do is we take our students as we find them and we wrap them in services and support. Because if you're a first generation college student from a low income background, it doesn't matter, what your ethnicity, what your race is, what your sex is. The cards are stacked against you when you walk in the door. And those are the students that come in our door. And so I love when you and I, talked a little bit before this about the fact that you are on a campaign for financial literacy. I believe that all students need to become more financially literate, but I think that it is especially important for our students because they may or may not be getting it from home. And I've recently added the role of acting director of veteran and military student affairs. And I am really thoroughly enjoying that because I do have conversations with those students. And here's the funny thing. What I thought when I took that role, in addition to general counsel, I thought that I would be working with military veterans. And what I'm finding is military veterans, especially disabled veterans, have the ability to gift their education. And what parents are doing is they're gifting it to their children. And so the children that I'm getting, at least with a veteran and an older adult, somebody who's been through the military, they understand the bureaucracy. There's certain things that they understand. They understand processes. But what I'm finding with these students, of these military vets, is that they have absolutely no clue of the bureaucracy involved with their military education benefits. And so what we do is I sit down with them oftentimes if there is a question about their benefit, is I have them, and thank goodness we're starting to move towards in person again. I have them come to my office and we call the VA together. And we have conversations and we talk about it, and then I'll hang up and then we'll talk some more, and I'll tell them, if you still don't understand or if things are not happening the way you believe they're supposed to happen, let's get back together. Let's give the VA a call, because I want you to understand, because you need to be part of this. I want you to learn how to handle these things for yourself.
That's good stuff. Really good stuff. Now, when you say gift, so if the parent did not go to school and
Right.
use their GI Bill, they can gift that to their child?
Yes. Yes.
That
Yes.
is awesome.
It is.
And I
It's
wonder how many
amazing.
people really know that.
I have no idea, but I'll tell you, I have 26 students right now, and I would say probably about 20 of them all have been gifted their education. Now, what I'll also tell you that I love about my students, and these students are a little bit different than other students, I will tell you the parents are very active. And so these kids are over 18, so they have to learn to handle things themselves. But what I love about these parents is oftentimes also the parent will call me and say, I want to talk to you about this. I think something's not going right. And when I say to them, listen, I understand and I want to help you. And I love the fact that you're helping your child, your student, but I need to make sure, because they're over 18, we need to have a conversation. I want to make sure that they're okay, that we have the conversation. And then I add the parent in on the call, and it's great. I love when I can add the student, the parent, and me, because we have conversations, and sometimes those parents have been so helpful. And so we're communicating the same message to the student, and we're both helping that student learn how to be more responsible, how to ask for help, how to ask the right questions, where to go. So I love being a general counsel. I love being in-house, but I've been in this role for about 6 months, and I'll tell you, it's my jet fuel some days, because it really makes me feel connected to the mission of the university because I get to see the student. And we're meeting actually on Monday with a foundation who's going to give us a grant, and it's going to allow us to expand the services that we have. And I'm really, really excited, and especially about our ROTC program. A lot of our ROTC cadets are National Guard members, and they're going to school to be nurses. And I'm just tickled to death that to be involved and to help them and support them in that journey and that goal.
That is pretty awesome. That's good stuff. So now let's talk about, because you're doing a couple other things. Let's talk about Above the Law.
Okay, sure.
Break that down for us and talk about your contribution to Above the Law.
Yeah. So, for many years before the pandemic, I kept my head down, did my job. That's about all I did, and I found that it was lonely when you're a general counsel. I don't have I have a deputy general counsel and I have a paralegal, but I lacked the like in a law firm, there's people around you to help you, support you, to talk through problems. And I lacked that, especially at the pandemic. And so I started to connect with some people on LinkedIn. There were some people that had encouraged me to start writing and posting. And so I started to do that. And then after doing that for a while, I posted a first article, and that article on LinkedIn was, I'm trying to remember, it was about being a in-house counsel was more about being a lawyer was more about being a strategic partner than a lawyer. And so I started writing, and then I was invited to consider being a monthly contributor to Above the Law. And part of the reason I pursued that was because a lot of people, when they think about lawyers and they think about law school, they think about going and being a public defender, a criminal prosecutor, going to be a judge's clerk, or going into big law. And I felt that there was not a lot out there for in-house lawyers. And I love being an in-house lawyer with a passion. So it was very exciting to be given the opportunity to begin to write articles directed specifically at inside counsel. And I enjoy, and it's led to a lot of mentoring and relationship building with peers, and also with people who are considering going in-house. And there are myths that need to be dispelled, because I want people, when they make choices, yes, this is the right job for me, but it's not right for everybody. And I wanted to kind of pull back the curtain and give other people an opportunity to see what that life looked like.
So you would say this is a great resource for someone who either thinking about becoming a lawyer or in law school, that this is a great resource to hear some real nuggets about what this industry is about, but also to learn and connect with people as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that was the whole goal when I started to do it. And that's why I continue to do it. I don't get paid for it. I really enjoy it. And it has led to a lot of really great relationships. So, yeah.
That's good. Awesome. Now, I want to get you, because we're getting ready to wrap up in about 10 minutes, but I want you, because you mentioned, the financial literacy campaign that I'm on. And so what I'd like to do is ask you some money questions, and nothing too deep.
Good.
But, but one of the things that we find is that, talking about money used to be taboo, and it may still be a little taboo-ish because it's personal. However, it's like a habit that you never improve upon. As you build bad habits throughout your life, if they're not broken and new habits are created, they will continue from generation to generation.
Absolutely agree with that.
So the first question I want to ask you is, where did you learn the most about money?
So I would say I learned from my grandfather. He was a Depression era person, and he believed wholeheartedly in the importance of talking about money, because the only way that he and his family had gotten through the Depression was being financially responsible and trying to budget. And so, yeah, and he also talked to me. I remember I got my first, he helped me get I'm trying to remember now what it was. I think it was a savings bond or something. But, and we talked about the different vehicles that I could use in order to save, invest. And so I remember having that conversation with him. And that is what really opened my eyes about the importance of having conversations with money, understanding money, and planning around money.
I am sure that he shares some really interesting stories with you. I mean, it's one thing to read about that time period from the history books, but
Yes,
to actually speak with someone who actually lived I'm sure that was pretty awesome.
it was.
Who do you think is the most responsible party in a child's life to teach them about money?
I mean, I think all families are different. But I will tell you, in my family, my husband was raised in a family where you didn't speak about money. And because I was raised in a family that did speak about money, I mean, the conversations we had was, how can you expect a child to learn how to be fiscally responsible if you never had that conversation? And in 2008, when the stock market crashed and I left my job at the law firm and I went to state government, my salary was cut in half. And I had children, 3 children, 2 of them who were in high school. And I went home, and I know I freaked my husband out because I didn't tell him I was going to do it. I laid it out. I said, I made this amount yesterday. Today, I make this amount. And I was like, so we are going to have conversations about how we spend money, how we save money. And I'm glad I had that conversation. I feel like all 3 of my children have been able to weather some of the ups and the downs that they have had, because we had that conversation. And I would have done it all over again. And like I said, my husband was really freaked out at first. I remember him looking at me and going, "What are you doing? Stop." But and my kids, I think, appreciated it and have benefited from it.
And you bring up something really interesting because you talked about yourself and your husband having that conversation. I can remember my parents. I don't remember ever them ever having a conversation about money, except for the fact that, my dad would pay the mortgage and my mom would pay the bills that kept the house running. And then one day, all of a sudden, we lost our
Right.
house
Yeah.
because their
Yeah.
relationship deteriorated. And my dad said, well, you know
Right.
what? I won't pay the mortgage, but I'm not going to tell
Right.
you about it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was like the first real conversation. It was a bad experience.
Yeah.
And so that leads me into, because you talked about, your kids, because I was going to ask you, like, what type of conversations do you have with your family? And you talked about your husband and also your children. Give
Yeah.
us a couple nuggets, like when you talk to your children about money, what are those conversations like?
Well, and you know what's so funny? So I think so I'm glad I had the conversations I had with them. I probably needed to have done it less like, I'm going to just toss you into a gold bucket of ice water, because in some ways I kind of went maybe a little bit too far, because subsequently I had to have conversations with my kids, because not so much my oldest, but my 2 younger ones. They were like, okay, I'm not using a credit card ever. And I was like, okay, that my point of this conversation was never not to not spend money. But it was about to spend it responsibly, to have a budget. And there are certain things you will have to buy on credit. And we had conversations about how, like, I got them one of those basic credit cards to help them establish credit, because it's really difficult to buy a house or a car without having credit. And so I kind of had to, after having the conversation, I had to readjust the conversation and say, okay, yes, there's a spectrum here, and I was encouraging you not to be over here, but oh my gosh, you can't be over here either. So we had that conversation. The other thing that I learned is, you still have to live your life, and you also can't squirrel away all your money, all your acorns, because that's no way to live, and it's not sustainable. And I do remember in the military that we had gone so austere and bought nothing. And then we got to the point where we kind of ended up going too far and all of a sudden splurging, because it was not livable. So those are the lessons I would say is, understand that credit is important. It's not bad. You just have to use it responsibly. You need to be transparent about money. You have to teach your kids about money. And live a little and spend a little, because it has to be sustainable over time. And to just say, I'm not going to spend any money, is not the solution either.
Awesome. So last question about money.
Okay.
If you could have a conversation with your younger self,
Yeah.
what money lesson or what nugget would you talk about or share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the last thing I said. It's that you need to be fiscally and financially responsible, but that doesn't mean not spending money and sticking every single penny in a savings account.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're going to talk about one more thing, and I think
Okay.
this is extremely important. I want to talk about leadership briefly.
Okay.
And, leadership comes in a lot of different forms. And a lot of times, individuals will get jobs and they're an employee. And then because of bad leadership, they may get a bad taste in their mouth about whatever that role may be.
Right.
How would you advise somebody to find the proper type of leadership? And we're
Yeah.
thinking like, because you work with a lot of college students right now, and
Right.
so that's extremely important. So what type of advice on leadership would you give a young college student?
And I think that people need to understand leadership is not attached to a title or status. Leadership is how you conduct yourself every day. And I am a true believer in the fact that leadership is something that we all can do and we all should do. And I think that when you are in a situation and when you're an employee, um, I think it's important to watch and see what those people who you report to do and don't do. And I think it's important to start formulating in your mind what qualities and traits you think a good leader has and start to emulate them no matter what level you're at.
That is awesome. So we're at the end of the show now. Is there anything that you would like to say as a parting gift to the audience? Anything that you want to share and just drop on us as a parting gift?
Um, I think that financial literacy is important. And I think it's something that we need to be talking about, and it should not be taboo. And I'm so excited for the work that you're doing. And I think, it's something we need to continue to talk about.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being a guest on the show.
Thank you for
I
inviting
definitely
me.
want to say appreciate you as a EIU alumni.
Yay.
Great job at Kentucky State. You can connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. You can also follow her on Twitter as well. You can also go to abovethelaw.com to read some of that great content if you're thinking about becoming a lawyer or if you're in law school. And so appreciate you. Happy Women's History Month, and you have a great day, okay?
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Bye
Talk to you
bye.
soon. Bye-bye.